Welcome back to another episode of the Big Apple and Broad Street Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Hawkers, joined as always and once again by my co host, Luke Milai. Luke, how are you doing on this wonderful Friday afternoon?
It's good to be back, Brandon. It's been a long break. We were both pretty busy with school, but I'm glad we can finally get it back underway. And it's like the best time of year. You've got basketball, hockey, baseball, and football's getting started again. So, this is the best time of year to talk sports, and I'm glad we're back right now.
Oh, I fully agree. And it's honestly great that we're done school for the semester. It was a really busy semester for the both of us. Very hard in terms of classes and other stuff going on. But we're back better than ever and ready to give you guys a lot more content from your favorite two podcast hosts. So, without further ado, we're going to jump into something that has really passed on the way because, as Luke mentioned, football is starting up soon. But myself and Luke never really had a chance to discuss the NFL offseason really as a whole for the Jets and the Eagles. So, with that being said, Luke, how did you feel about the Eagles offseason as a whole?
I thought it was fine. I didn't expect them to go too crazy because I don't think anyone anticipates the Eagles winning anything next year. I think next year is supposed to be a developing year where you just try and find pieces for the future. And I think you got to find out what you have with Jalen Hurts. So I was glad they didn't go out and spend like a ton of money that really hurt them in the future. They made some trades to get some more draft picks next year. I like that. I like them going out in the draft and getting a weapon for Jalen Hurts. That was pretty big for me. They drafted an offensive lineman too, and Landon Dickerson. If he's healthy, I think he could be big. So I like what the Eagles did. I think it's a very big year for Jalen Hurts. I think I'm in the train that you have to get Jalen Hurts as many weapons as you can now because it gives you the best opportunity to evaluate him. Because last year we had so many excuses for him and Carson. If the offensive line stinks, there's no receivers, there's no one to throw to, which were all relevant points. But I think this year you need to know if Jalen Hurts is the guy or if he really looks like the guy. And with Jalen Rager, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goddard, Greg Ward, Miles Sanders, I think Jalen Hurts has the option now. And hopefully the offensive line can protect enough. But I think he's got the weapons. Now it's up to him. And now the Eagles can make a definitive decision, hopefully barring any injuries, whether he's the guy for the future. And that was the big part of the offense.
Yeah, I mean, I've really liked how the Eagles, despite what their management was coming out and saying in the offseason, really committed to surrounding their quarterback with the proper weapons and the proper structure to be fully evaluated and have the best chance at success. I mean, I know you mentioned it, but Devonta Smith as the first round pick, jumping the Giants to get him in the process. I mean, that's how you surround your guy with weapons. You pick Landon Dickerson, who is one of, if not the most versatile offensive lineman in that entire draft class. It's really a great way that the Eagles went about it. Obviously, with their cap space limitations, they didn't exactly fill every single need and didn't exactly cover every single thing to make themselves a contender again, so to say. But I really enjoyed how the Eagles went about the offseason because they didn't do anything wacky or wonky, really, but it worked out in the best for them. And that's at this point. Obviously, the Eagles could make a few more moves. They could do something crazy, but at this juncture, I can safely say that I know Luke feels good about it. And as an outsider looking in, I feel pretty good about their offseason as well. We transition to the Jets now. I think their offseason as a whole, from the start of hiring Robert Saleh as the head coach to the draft really was as good as it can get. So after you hire Salah, people were still clamoring for Darnold. The Jets made the right move in moving on from Darnold because in the NFL, as I've seen personally with the Jets, if the coach, GM, and quarterback are not all lined up on the same page, it's not a recipe for success unless the guy is just worlds talented above everyone else and can just elevate an entire roster. McCagnon, Gase, never on the same page. McCagnon and Bowles, never on the same page. Darnold, while having a lot of talent, did not have that world class ability to uplift an entire roster, and as a result, had to be moved on. I wish Darnold all the best in Carolina, but it was a move that had to be done. Signing Corey Davis, signing Carl Lawson, other depth signings. I mean, the Jets shored up positions of need. They got another wide receiver across from Denzel Mims. They finally got an edge. So then when we get to the draft, the Jets first went with Zach Wilson, which I think most people knew was going to be the pick, but once it was made, it made me feel a lot better about the direction of the franchise. It's like, okay, everyone's on the same page. We can move forward. The next pick after that, they traded up for Elijah Vera Tucker, who, as Luke knows, was a guy I liked early on in the process, just from looking at different stuff. And I mean, I've seen USC play a little bit, but I'm by no means a film junkie yet. He was a guy that was heaped on a lot of praise by guys that know what they're talking about. The Jets traded up for their guy, which, in my opinion, is something they never would have done in the past. This is something that the new regime knew they need to do more to protect their quarterback than what the past regimes did to protect Darnold. How do you do that? You add to that O line. Vera Tucker and Becton on the same side of the offensive line is going to be disgusting. It's going to be incredible. The next pick after that, how do you help your quarterback? You get an explosive playmaker, and that's what they did with Elijah Moore. An explosive guy out of Ole Miss, carrying on that tradition from DK Metcalf and AJ Brown. Different type of player, but he's going to be that big yards after catch, big explosion after the catch guy that the Jets have not had in years. They then picked another guy on offense, Michael Carter, an explosive guy at the running back position, something the Jets have not had in years. So your first four picks are offense, and then after that, you take swings on guys like Jamie Sherwood, a linebacker, Michael Carter II, which ironically, same name as the running back, but he's a cornerback. Jason Pinnock, cornerback. Hamza Nasruddin, linebacker. Braden Ekeles, cornerback. Jonathan Marshall, defensive tackle. You let your defensive-minded head coach take swings on guys he thinks could fit into the scheme. So really, in an overall sense, I really enjoyed the Jets offseason. I think that they attack positions in need. I think they have a coherent plan. And it's the first step in the process of bringing the Jets back to relevancy and significance in both the AFC East and the National Football League.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm someone that really like a team that is expecting to get better. I don't think the Jets are expecting a huge jump. I mean, they're going to improve on their 2 wins. I think we can both agree on that. But when you get a guy like Zach Wilson, the first thing you have to do is protect him. And now they have Becton and Vera Tucker. You mentioned it. That's awesome. That's something, a team that didn't do that later in the draft. We can get into that later. A team that didn't pick an offensive lineman. I think they should have. But I really like that for the Jets. They have some good weapons now for Zach Wilson. I think giving him protection and giving him weapons is going to be the easiest way for him to transition. It's still a tough division. We know how good the Bills are. We know how good the Dolphins defense specifically was last season. So the Jets, I don't think they're going to make a huge jump in the division, but I think it's reasonable to expect maybe even a third place finish. They're going to improve on those 2 wins. I think things are moving in the right direction because the Jets, they're with Gase and even Greg Williams for part of the season last year, their culture was just messed up. And I think now they have a direction. I think that's such an important thing with the young and rebuilding team. You have to commit to that direction. And now they've done that on offense. We know what Robert Saleh brings on defense. And if he can get his guys in the building, I think this team has a lot of reason to be optimistic. And I'm happy for you. I think they did the right things in this offseason. And now it's just going to be seeing if it pays off on the field.
Yeah, it's very exciting that the Jets have an identity. They have a coach that players want to play for. I mean, you look at reports, they had 80 out of their 90 guys report for optional minicamp, optional OTAs. So it shows that guys are bought in, the rookie class is bought in, they want to prove themselves. And when you have that type of vibe, that type of culture, everything goes better for your team. So I think now we're moving on to schedule predictions, right? Schedule, like looking at the team schedules, right?
Yeah, yeah, that works for me.
Yeah. So after the draft, after free agency, the next big event is always schedule. It's always who's on the schedule, who's playing what week, who has the prime time matchup. So taking a look at strength of schedule based on the 17 games. If we go down the list, starting at number one, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers with an opponent winning percentage of 574.
That's tough.
Working our way through the top 10, we have the Baltimore Ravens, the Chicago Bears, the Green Bay Packers, the Minnesota Vikings, Detroit Lions, Cincinnati Bengals, Las Vegas Raiders, Cleveland Browns, and the Los Angeles Rams. Working our way in the middle of the pack, we have the Seattle Seahawks, Kansas City Chiefs, Arizona Cardinals, Tennessee Titans, Houston Texans, Washington Football Team, Los Angeles Chargers, Jacksonville Jaguars, San Francisco 49ers, New York Jets, New England Patriots. Approaching the bottom of the list, we have the Saints, Bills, Colts, Giants, Panthers, Broncos, Dolphins, Buccaneers, Falcons, Cowboys, and rounding out the bottom of the NFL in terms of strength of schedule is the Philadelphia Eagles with an opponent winning percentage of .430. So, at face value, what are your thoughts on this, Luke?
I mean, looking at the Eagles mainly, you mentioned the easiest strength of schedule .43. Their opponents went 117 and 155 last year. They struggled, and I think that's the benefit of the last place schedule, I guess, in the NFL, because you play your specific divisions every year, like you play a whole division. But the Eagles, because of being in last place, they play the 49ers, the Lions, and then this season, because of the added game, they'll play were all teams that struggled last year. So I don't know how much it really. I think it's beneficial for a team that wants to make a jump. I don't think the Eagles are looking to make that big of a jump, but I think this is why you see so much like parity in the NFL because things can flip like that. Because the team that struggled, obviously they're going to improve in the offseason with better draft picks, free agent signings, and now they get an easier schedule. I think it's always interesting seeing these schedules come out and the strength of schedule because things can flip on a dime. And like with primetime games too, you can see maybe who the NFL thinks is going to jump up the standings. Like we see the Browns getting more primetime games this season compared to last because obviously we saw what they did last season and you only expect them to improve. So I think for the Eagles, doesn't mean a whole lot. I think they'll still have a losing season, but it's just always cool to think about every year that teams can make those jumps because of these schedule makers.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about, but the were the second worst team in the NFL, yet they're in the middle of the pack of strength of schedule. I think that has more so to do with their division because they're in a division with
Mhm.
Miami, Buffalo, and New England. So, and if you look at the Jets and Patriots, they have the exact same strength of schedule. And the only difference between their opponents' records from last year is that the Jets are have 132, 138, and two ties. The Patriots have 133, 139, and no ties. It's that, and I feel like the division has a huge impact because Buffalo is one of the best teams in the division. Miami just missed the playoffs, and the Patriots were more middle of the pack, and the Jets completely bottomed out. And also, like you said, things can flip on a dime. Remember, the first year of the Adam Gase regime, if you even want to call it that at that point, the Jets approached 10 wins. It wasn't because they were a good team. It's because they played a absolutely horrible schedule. If you remember correctly, the Jets lost to both the winless Dolphins and the winless Bengals during that season. Everyone knew the writing was on the wall with the Adam Gase year, which led us to this year, where they had 2 wins. I mean, things can flip on their heads, and teams can have these fluke seasons because they play easier schedules. They make people seem better than they are. And then when they have the harder schedule of a first or second place team the next year, they bottom out and everyone gets fired. It's just a way of the NFL. It's why it's probably the best league in terms of parity, to be completely honest here. And if we now our focus to both the Eagles and Jets, I want to highlight to start off the Jets. I mean, opening up with Carolina, New England, Denver, Tennessee, and Atlanta, those are 5 winnable games to start the year. Obviously, we have the bye week, and then it's New England, Cincinnati, Indy, Buffalo, Miami, Houston, Philadelphia to approach week 13. The only real stud quarterback you're playing in those games
Jalen Hurts.
is Josh Allen, and maybe you can argue Joe Burrow, depending on how he improves this year. I mean, also, depending on Houston's situation, who the hell knows, part of my language, who's going to start for Houston because of the whole Deshaun Watson situation in every single regard, which is something we are not going to get into because I'm not trying to eviscerate people on this podcast, but I've done that enough. After week 13, it goes New Orleans, Miami, Jacksonville, Tampa, Buffalo. Depending on how Trevor Lawrence does this year, the only real stud quarterbacks you're playing this year, if you're the Jets, are Tom Brady and Josh Allen twice. This is not, and I'm not saying these teams that they're playing aren't quote unquote bad, but the Jets will, I think, will be able to stay in a lot of these games because they are not playing Aaron Rodgers. They're not playing Pat Mahomes. They're not playing Russell Will. Like, yeah, Tom Brady's Tom Brady, and Josh Allen's incredible. But outside of those games, unless some of these guys take steps forward, and some of them could take steps back, the Jets are going to be competitive in a lot of these games as a young, hungry team.
Yeah, that's huge. And that was a good point thinking about the quarterbacks because that's obviously where a lot of games are won and lost. And you said they're not going to play Aaron Rodgers. You never know. Aaron Rodgers could be anywhere next season. But that's huge. And I think for a young team, that's the start of it, being competitive. You're in a lot of these games. So even if you lose these games, like now you've been in it. Now you've seen it because then that sets the table for next season being like, we've seen all these situations before. Now let's go win those competitive games. So I think the Jets, they could even win some of them this year. Like they're going to be competitive, as you said. So I think this year is going to be big. And the Jets, obviously, so they have a middle of the pack schedule. That's really due to their division, making it a lot tougher. But I think if they can win those out of division games, they might struggle with the division games. But you said they have a chance to get off to a hot start. And who knows? If they win a lot of early games, that could get some confidence, get the ball rolling. You never know. But I think there's reason to be excited. I think there's definitely a lot of winnable games. Like the more you think about it, the more you think about the quarterback matchups, I think they've got a shot to win some games.
Yeah, I'm never going to be used to saying 17 games now, but I think they have a chance to finish around 8-9, maybe even approach 9-8. So honestly, who knows? So flipping it, why don't you go over the Eagles schedule? Because with that strength of schedule being way below 500, if the Eagles take even a little bit of a step forward and their division doesn't play up to par, who knows? The Eagles could sneak into a playoff spot, don't you think?
Yeah, as funny as it seems and like as out of this world as it sounds, they could accidentally fall into the playoffs like they almost did last. They were a terrible team last year. And they were still like if they won the last 2 games of the season, they would have been in. But the Eagles, I think the first thing that jumps out at me, honestly, is the fact that they have a week 14 bye. That's tough. That is 13 straight weeks of football before they finally get a break. That means obviously injuries are probably the number one thing there. But even if the team's struggling, there's so many things that a bye week helps you out with that the Eagles are just going to have to live with. And they're most likely going to be a young and probably struggling team. So the fact that they're going to go 13 weeks without a break sticks out to me the most. Like that's tough. That's the latest bye you can have in this 18-week season. So I think that's something that's going to be noteworthy and we're going to have to watch out for. But you mentioned it. The Eagles have an easy schedule. I think their biggest challenges are week 4 and 6 with the Chiefs and the Buccaneers. I think obviously they were in the Super Bowl, so those are the biggest challenges. But after that, we know how poor the division was with Washington, Dallas, New York. They all struggled. Then I mentioned before they have the 49ers, the Lions, the Jets. Those are teams that struggled last season. Then you've got the Broncos in there. The Chargers should be a fun game with Herbert. That's a game the Eagles probably won't win, but the Chargers are a good team. The Raiders are always solid with Gruden and Carr. So it'll be interesting. I think they'll still be below 500. I think even with a weak division, I think even with a weak strength of schedule, I think the Eagles just aren't there yet. I mean, obviously they could go below 500 and win the division, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Eagles have a range of 6-11 to 7-10. I think that's where I think they'll improve. I think they'll win more games, but I just don't think they're at that jump yet. And I think they win some divisional games. I think they win some of those. I think they win 1 or 2 of those games against the Niners, Jets, and Lions just because they were all in last place. I think they win one of those. But I just don't see a huge jump. And I don't know if that's how you feel, but I think the Eagles 6-11, 7-10. I think that's where they'll be around.
I mean, if I'm an Eagles fan and I'm trying to see essentially how the team's going to improve, I think it boils down to two things. One, how does Jalen Hurts progress? Because, as always, you can only go as far as your quarterback in this league. And two, can the defense be a little more consistent in terms of production and stopping teams? Because obviously, with injuries, they had to kind of scrap things together. There was a bit of a joke of some of the cornerbacks they had to play down the stretch last year. But if they can get more consistency out of their defense and Jalen Hurts can really start to grow as both a passer, runner, and just overall quarterback, I think the Eagles could threaten for 8 wins with that schedule because if I know anything about the NFC East, it's that you can't take the results from one year and translate them to the next because it just never happens. And obviously, Washington's defense is going to be insane. I'm still skeptical about their offense with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Dallas should be clicking on all cylinders. And the Giants, I mean, once again, predicated on their quarterback, but they have a stronger defense overall than the Eagles do. But honestly, I'm just really excited for football to be back. And to close out our football segment, let's step outside our comfort zone a little bit. Let's go over some winners and losers overall of this NFL offseason so far, because it's not completely over yet. The quote unquote offseason doesn't end until week one starts. So, Luke, I'm going to kick it over to you, man. Who's your winner or loser? I'm not too high on this team. I'm way higher on this team. What do you got?
The Bengals lost, Brandon. They made me very mad. I they they watched their franchise quarterback get sacked and take a season-ending injury and you're up there in the draft and you have an incredible talent in Sewell on the board that fits your need, and he's incredible. Like, and they picked Jamar Chase, and I know Jamar Chase is incredible, and I can already see the post on NFL's Instagram right now, week 1. They're gonna throw him a touchdown. It'll be like the Burrow Chase connection is elite, and like I can see it now in all caps. But let's say we get to week 4 or 5, Burrow's leading the league in sacks taken. Like I, I just I feel like the Bengals could have honestly been better this year with the sophomore year of Burrow. That's where we see a lot of guys like take that jump while they're still on that rookie deal where teams can put talent around them. And Joe Burrow, like he's seen things now in the NFL. Despite his injury, he should be back, right? 100% by week 1. So this is the year I thought like they could make a little bit of a jump. It would have been cool. We know the Steelers dropped off. We know how the rest of their division is. So I thought they could have improved, but they signed offensive tackle Riley Reef. He's not as good as Sewell. I think we both know that. He's not as long term either. So I think that was just a big swing and a miss. And then winners really quickly, based really off of their trade in the first round alone in their draft, Justin Fields and the Bears. I thought that was awesome for them. I think that's always just been their problem. I mean, Mitchell Trubisky, Nick Foles going back and forth last year, and they still made the playoffs. Like that's a team that has a defense that is ready to win now, and their quarterbacks were not. And Justin Fields, while he might not be ready to win now, I think he's already a better option. And bringing back Allen Robinson, franchise tagging him, I think most people thought he was going to be gone this year, possibly to even your Jets. So I think that's big. Bringing back a weapon as good as him for a quarterback like Justin Fields. They brought in a new offensive tackle, Tevin Jenkins, in the second round this year. So I think there's reason to be optimistic about the Bears, especially if you don't know what's happening with Aaron Rodgers. Look out for the Bears, Brandon. I think they're winners of the offseason. They're one of the winners.
I I think you hit the nail on the head with Cincinnati, man.
They make me so mad.
It's just okay. Looking at it like this, right? Would you rather have picked Jamar Chase, and I know they picked a guy in the second round who was nowhere near Penny Sewell's talent. So would you rather have that combination or instead have Penny Sewell make sure Joe Burrow's knee doesn't go in the other direction when he gets hit, and then pick Terrence Marshall in the second round? Listen, after seeing what happened to Joe Burrow, I'm taking the second combination 10 times out of 10. And that is no indictment on Jamar Chase as a player. He's absolutely incredible as a wide receiver. But you have to keep your franchise quarterback upright. Riley Reef is not going to get the job done for Cincinnati. Not in that division. Not in a division that has Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cleveland. Myles Garrett is going to look at Riley Reef and say, yeah, I'm getting 3 sacks today. Like, what are we doing? Yeah, okay. You have Jamar Chase. You have Joe Mixon. You have Tyler Boyd. You have T. Higgins. It doesn't matter how many weapons you have if your quarterback's getting hit every time. The Bengals are repeating the David Carr situation all over again. David Carr got hit so many times, he forgot how to play quarterback for the Texans because they didn't give him any protection. Just absolutely unbelievable. And a winner, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with Chicago, but just to go in a bit of a different direction, I think that the 49ers nailed it with Trey Lance. I was so worried they were going to go with Mac Jones at number 3. And it never made sense to me. I mean, between Justin Fields and Trey Lance, I mean, they have so much of a higher ceiling than Jones. And that's not an indictment on Jones as a player because I think he is a good player. I just didn't think he was a number 3 overall type player. And the fact that the 49ers got it right, the fact that they have the foundation, they're getting all their defense back from injury. They're getting their offense back from injury. they're going to be a force to be reckoned with and show why they were in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. So, with that, really excited for football. I know I said this again, but stay locked and loaded to the show for the rest of the offseason as we approach the NFL season because it's going to be a blast this year. And with the added game, it's going to create even more chaos. And with that, it's time to talk about the NBA. And man, it's been a minute since we talked basketball because listen, I'm just gonna come out and say the Knicks are back. They're back. I don't know any other way to phrase it except that the New York Knicks are a good basketball team again. And I remember vividly saying before the season started, I felt better about the Knicks this year, but I didn't think they were going to make the playoffs. And I could not have predicted RJ Barrett stepping up, Julius Randle becoming a MVP type caliber player this season because who would have after last year? Nerlens Noel becoming a defensive menace. I
He's
mean,
always been one.
Taj Gibson, Derrick Rose regaining his. I mean, listen, this Knicks team has completely sucked the life out of anyone talking about the Brooklyn Nets. The funny, just going off topic a little bit, Brooklyn Nets are having to use a promo code for 50% off tickets to try to fill their building right now. The Knicks already sold out both games 1 and 2 at the Garden. If that needs to if you need to hear anything else about New York basketball after that, about who's really king in that city, just I can keep going, but like that's pretty evident right there, don't you think?
Pretty cool. I think in the city in particular, I think it's always been like fandom wise, it's Knicks. I think the Nets, obviously, we can both agree they have a lot of talent, but it'll be interesting because if the Knicks are filling up that building and the Nets are struggling, as you're saying, it'll be interesting because how much of a home court advantage do the Nets even have at that point if they were practically giving away playoff tickets for a team that nationally I think has gotten a ton of attention and deservedly so. They're an incredible team, but man, in their own state, their own city, it's tough.
I mean, dude, the Knicks are king. I mean, the New York Knicks will always be king in New York, and it's so exciting to talk about them as a legit playoff team because I'm the king of segues, and we're segueing to talk about the NBA playoff picture. So, with one playing game left to go, the Golden State Warriors play the Memphis Grizzlies to decide who is going to be the number 8 seed and face down the Utah Jazz. And, well, yeah, they play tonight as we're recording it. The Eastern Conference, on the other hand, is completely set. So we got the Philadelphia 76ers as the 1 seed. They're playing the Washington Wizards. The Brooklyn Nets as the number 2 seed. They are playing the Boston Celtics. The Milwaukee Bucks as the 3 seed face down the Miami Heat as the 6 seed. And the New York Knicks as the number 4 seed face down the Atlanta Hawks, who are the 5 seed. So, with that being said, how are we feeling about these matchups? What way are you leaning? Do you expect chalk? Do you expect any upsets? How are we feeling about these matchups?
Well, it's funny because I have my predictions for both the East and the West. For the East, I have no upsets, which is pretty interesting because I just think the teams that are at the top are just really, really good this year. And I think the biggest upset potential was the Heat over the Bucks, just because we saw it last year. I think it's going to be a popular one, but watching the Bucks this year and the few games that I think they've really improved. They've got a lot of role players now that are just perfect for Giannis and Chris Middleton. Drew Holiday is a huge third piece for them that I know I didn't expect to have that much of an impact. He's been awesome, but looking at each series, I think the Sixers and the Wizards, I think the Sixers should take care of them pretty easily. The Wizards have been on fire as of late. I think that's a pretty noteworthy thing that like they're going into the playoffs winning like 18 of their last 24 games. Like they've been ridiculous. But I think the Sixers, they know what they have to do. They're going to handle their business. They're the better team by far. I think the Sixers are just gonna defend them really well. And if Beal and Westbrook aren't on fire, then that's really it. And here, how about you get into that Knicks Hawk series? I want to hear what you have to say first.
I'm of the frame of mind that the Knicks and Hawks could become that type of 90s series like the Knicks and Heat was and the Knicks and Bulls was, where they are going to be consistently facing each other down in the playoffs and have bad blood and just it's going to be one of those series where as they both keep improving, they're going to reach the top of the Eastern Conference and really just establish that legacy, that rivalry that people remember for years once it's over. With that being said, I think that this is one of the few teams that could give the Knicks a challenge. I think that the Knicks win it in 6 or 7, but I think they're two teams that really stack up well against each other. I think that in every time they've played this year, the games have always been close. No one's been no one's blown each other out in any of the games. If you watch, I think both games went to overtime. They're just two very good teams. The Hawks have the insane offensive firepower with Trey Young on one hand. The Knicks, who have the offensive firepower, really pride themselves on their grittiness and just tenacity on the defensive end. So I'm just really excited for the series, but I truly think that this is the first Knicks playoff series win in a very long time. And then they go face down the 76ers, which do I think the Sixers win the series? Yeah, most likely, but I don't think it's a walkover series. I think that the Sixers would have to battle really hard in that series to make it out on top. Going through the other series, I don't see the Celtics beating the Nets. Maybe they take a game or two. Think that's a wash. Obviously, if the Sixers lost to Washington, it'd be the upset of the century in the series, but I don't think that happens. And I really do think Miami could beat Milwaukee because I've said this before. I've said this to some people off show. I think Miami is the sleeping giant of this Eastern Conference. I think that they once they got to the playoffs, they're going to be a completely different team and just show why they made the finals last year. No, I know we know that Tyler Hero hasn't exactly been the greatest player this year, but I think he'll be able to turn it up this playoffs and really show why he's the type of player that the Heat didn't want to trade in a James Harden deal. Obviously, Milwaukee could still probably win the series, but I really do think that the Heat are going to put up a good fight and will eventually come out on top in this Eastern Conference series. So, as we transition to the West, I guess I'll get this started by showing the seeds. We got the Jazz at 1, the Phoenix Suns at 2, Denver at 3, the Clippers at 4, Mavericks at 5, Blazers at 6, Lakers at 7, and then either Memphis or Golden State at 8. Once again, Luke, how are we feeling about these matchups, and do we see any upsets and anything of the sort?
Well, Brandon, I told you I see a lot of upsets in the West. I First of all, this is kind of weird to predict, but I see the Warriors winning tonight, and then I see the Warriors winning the series against the Jazz. And I want to go a little in depth because it seems kind of outlandish to predict an 8 over a 1, but I'm looking at it. Donovan Mitchell hasn't played in over a month. He's expected to come back for game 1, but that tells me he's not 100% if he's forcing it to come back for game 1, even after such a long break, his ankle has to still be an issue for him. And I think when you look at the Jazz, well, obviously they're a good defensive team with Rudy anchoring the back end. What really gets them across is their 3-point shooting advantage that they have. They take the most threes in the league, and they're top 3 in percentage of makes. So they take the most, they make almost the highest percentage, which means they're outscoring teams from the 3-point line by a ton. And that's where a big offensive advantage comes in for them. They have a ton of role players that can hit threes. That's why we've seen Jordan Clarkson be so successful. Joe Ingles, Mike Conley, all those guys are hitting threes at a very good rate this year. So it hasn't just had to be Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert trying to figure out things with a pick and roll on offense every play. But where the Warriors, I think, make that up is the Warriors are top 3 in 3-pointers made this season. They make only 2 less per game than the Jazz. They shoot them at 38%, which is right behind the Jazz. I think the Warriors are going to make up that 3-point margin. And Steph Curry playing on the outside, Rudy Gobert is where that defense starts and ends, and the Warriors also take a lot of threes. I can really see the Warriors sort of getting hot. Steph Curry, Jordan Poole, Kent Bazemore, all these guys, if they can hit their threes, I can see them playing the Jazz out of this thing. I think the Warriors are going to go small with Draymond, and I think it's going to be a really fun series. I'm predicting a Warriors upset, but like I think Donovan Mitchell's not 100%, and I think that's why I'm giving the Warriors the edge. I think the teams without him are a lot more even than if he is at 100%, obviously. But from that series, I'm going Warriors.
Yeah, man. I think that Steph Curry has to be really regarded as like 3 separate players at this point. I mean, what that guy's able to do just to elevate his team is unbelievable. And obviously, I think Utah will put up a fight. There's a reason they're the 1 seed in the West, but I really do think that Golden State will come out on top in that series.
Now
I'm
watch the
not
Grizzlies go win tonight and not even let Golden State make the 8th seed.
now. Listen, if that's the case, I got Utah in that
The
series.
same here.
Yeah, as that caveat, if Golden State loses today, we have Utah, so we're covering our bases. I promise. All right. For the next series, the Phoenix Suns facing down the Los Angeles Lakers. I mean, I don't know because I want to say, oh, the Lakers are gonna upset them, but they are so banged up and beaten down, and one bad move on LeBron's ankle or AD something because he hurts a different body part, it seems every other week. I like Phoenix a lot. They have the defense to shut down the Lakers and the offense to win games. I think Phoenix wins this series. I really do.
Yeah, I think it'll be a really good series. I have the Lakers, but I don't think you can make a wrong choice with this prediction because both teams, the Lakers, we know they just coming off a championship, but they're injured. That's why they're back in that 7th seed. The Suns, they've been really consistent. I think it's going to be a close series on the surface. And then when it comes down to those close games, those big road games that teams have to win, other than Chris Paul, this Suns team is so young and so inexperienced. Like, this is Devin Booker's first time in the playoffs. DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, a ton of these guys just don't have that experience. And people make fun of Chris Paul. Oh, he hasn't won the championship, but he's seen everything. I mean, he's been in the biggest of games. I think Chris Paul will be ready, but I just don't know if those guys will be ready. I think Devin Booker in playoff type atmosphere against that level of defense, I think that's where the Suns are going to win or lose games. It's going to be on him more than Chris Paul. I think Chris Paul's going to get his. He's going to do what he does. But I can see Devin Booker struggling in his first ever playoff series against the defending champions, against the team that knows how to play defense in the playoffs, against arguably one of the best players of all time. Obviously, Anthony Davis is great as well. Great role players. That's why I have the Lakers. I think it will be very close, but just with that playoff experience edge, I think the Lakers are going to come out on top.
I don't know, man. I mean, Chris Paul has elevated this team this year. I don't see any reason, and I mean any reason, why he can't do it for them in the playoffs. Like honestly, I don't understand how he does it, but he always makes these teams better. And you saw it with Houston. When he got to Houston, it's not like James Harden exactly had all this playoff experience. Yeah, he made it to the finals, but with Chris Paul there, Harden really was able to elevate himself to that different level. And I see Devin Booker doing the same. But with that combo, I think that Phoenix can make a big run and knock off the Lakers.
I think that's a good point. But I think by the time Chris Paul got to Houston, James Harden was already like an MVP level player. And I think Devin Booker is an incredible scorer, but I just don't think he's on the level yet of like being a winner. James Harden was like won an MVP and was top 3 in MVP like 3 times before Chris Paul got there. I think it's a good point because Chris Paul is obviously incredible and Devin Booker is incredible too. But that's why I think it's so close. But I've got to give LeBron James and Anthony Davis the advantage in this one.
It's going to be a great series regardless. And moving on to the next series, once again, another potential upset here. The Denver Nuggets facing down the Portland Trailblazers. I'll get this one started. I really like Denver as a team. They have the likely MVP in Nikolai Jokic, and they have a really solid team around him. It's just Denver has been consistently inconsistent. So, and with Dame Lillard and McCollum and that team around them, I think that the Blazers could upset Denver and really give them a tough series that they can't bounce back from. Now, the caveat here is if Denver gets off to a hot start, I think they're winning the series with ease. But if there's a slow start involved from Jokic or Denver or really the role players on that team, I think Dame Lillard's going to smell blood in the water and going to close out that series a lot earlier than anyone expects.
Yeah, I think this will be another good one. Jokic, I agree. I think he's going to be the MVP, but I think without Jamal Murray, they're in a really tough spot. And I know when Jamal Murray got hurt, the Nuggets went on to win 9 or 10 games in a row. Like Jokic didn't lie down and let this team fall, but I just really don't like this matchup for them. The Blazers are so good, and obviously we know how good Lillard and McCollum are. And I think in the past, one of the Blazers' biggest downfalls in the playoffs has been their perimeter defense because we, as good as Lillard and McCollum are at scoring, they're just not lockdown defenders. That's just not who they are. And I think Jamal Murray would have presented a really big challenge for them, but the fact that he's out, I think that puts a whole new layer onto the series. I don't think anyone can guard Lillard and McCollum, and I think they're going to get away with guarding whoever they have to on defense with Murray out. So I think Jokic is going to put up his big numbers, but against a Blazers team that is finally healthy, that's kind of why they're down here in the first place. They were completely obliterated by injuries at the beginning of the year, and Lillard held them in that playoff spot. So I think with most of their team back, Nuggets missing Murray, the Nuggets, I'm pretty sure they're missing Will Barton, if I'm not mistaken, due to injury as well. So they're just in a tough spot. Jokic is incredible, but I think the Blazers win this series.
All righty. You have our playoff predictions, and now it's time to transition to some regular season stuff, but good stuff
I think the
nonetheless.
Clippers beat the Mavs in the last series as well.
Oh, we skipped that one, didn't we?
We did.
Oh man. Oh yeah. I mean, Clippers, Mavs. Once again, I mean, I feel like this entire West is a toss-up, but
It's awesome.
I see redemption for Paul George and Kawhi Leonard this year. I don't see them fizzling out again in the first round like they did last year. No shot. No choking on Kawhi's part 2 years in a row. I like the Clippers in that series as well. So backtracking, now we are done every series for the playoffs, and it's time to look at regular season. If we go down the awards list for the MVP, the finalists, Steph Curry, Joel Embiid, Nikolai Jokic, Rookie of the Year, LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, Defensive Player of the Year, Rudy Gobert, Draymond Green, Ben Simmons, Most Improved Player, Jeremiah Grant, Michael Porter Jr., Julius Randle, Sixth Man of the Year, Jordan Clarkson, Joe Ingles, and Derrick Rose. And finally, for the Coach of the Year, Quinn Snyder, Tom Thibodeau, and Monty Williams.
Look at the Knicks having 3 guys out there.
So, just quickly, what do we think? Who do we think's gonna win each award? Luke, why don't you work down the list and tell me who you got and a quick little blurb of why you have that guy.
All right. So I think for each one, for MVP, is it who we think is going to win or who we think should win? I
Uh,
think Joel Embiid should win. Joel Embiid took a team that was the 6th seed and put them as the best team in the Eastern Conference. He's having the best year of his career at 28, 10, and 3 with some great defense as well. I think Nikola Jokic will win the award. Jokic is putting up incredible numbers, triple doubles left, right, winning with Jamal Murray out of the lineup. So I think that one's pretty close. I think Joel Embiid should win it. Then on to Rookie of the Year, where we get a little bit less biased. I'm going with LaMelo, and I know LaMelo missed games, and Anthony Edwards really had a strong end of the season. I think LaMelo just made his team so much better. Like LaMelo really impacted winning while putting up incredible stats, which is usually all it's about in Rookie of the Year. 16, 6, and 6. I think that's enough to win the award, especially with how good he was in terms of winning games for his team. And most improved, I think Julius Randle's the easy answer here. I mean, career highs in points, rebounds, assists with 24, 10, and 6. That's ridiculous. And playing a career high 37 and a half minutes per game and only missing 1 game. I'm pretty sure he played 71 out of 72. 6th Man of the Year, Jordan Clarkson. I think that's another one. Jazz have 2 guys up for this one, but Clarkson's a guy that can get you 30, even 40. Sometimes he did that to the Sixers off the bench whenever you want. And especially with Donovan Mitchell being out, he's been really their go-to scorer with Donovan Mitchell injured. And he's coming off the bench averaging 18 a game. So I think he's the guy there. Defensive Player of the Year, I'm going Ben Simmons. I think it's between Ben and Rudy for this one. Draymond's incredible, but I just think he hasn't been talked about enough this year for that. And I got to give the edge to Ben just because he can guard so many different positions and he does it so well. Like he can take people out of games. Rudy defends the rim well. And like that's huge. And I've seen all the charts and I've seen all the graphs the Jazz fans post on Twitter. I know Rudy's good. Like you can give him his props, but I think the fact that Ben's pretty good on those charts as well. And then you look at the fact that Ben can guard the best player on any team, no matter the position. I just think Ben Simmons being the best defender on the team that's the best in defensive rating, that's got to give him some boost. So I'm going Ben Simmons there. Coach of the Year, I'm going Tom Thibodeau. They won 20 more games than last season. Playing, and I think this is kind of underrated, playing in probably one of the league's best divisions, meaning they're playing the Sixers and the Nets more than the other teams they play, and those are the top 2 teams in the East. So the fact that the Knicks were able to have such a huge improvement while playing such quality opponents, I think that's something that's underrated. And obviously Thibodeau, we talked about it when he first got hired. He implements a culture. And I think that's the biggest thing. He changed how people see the Knicks. He changed the way the Knicks play themselves. And I think a lot of props to him. I think he's the Coach of the Year.
So to start off for me, this is a guy I've kind of stood behind the entire year. If we're talking about MVP, to me, and I doubt this is how the league will look at it, I see someone that is so vital to their team that without them, their team goes nowhere. Their team can't even hang on for dear life. And to me, that's Steph Curry. I mean, not even taking into numbers for this. Steph Curry, when he's not on the court, the Warriors are one of the worst, if not the worst team in the NBA. With him on the court, they're a borderline playoff team. They made the play in. Curry going for almost 30, 40 every night, making incredible shots, willing a team to victory that is still missing Klay Thompson. And I think once Thompson gets back, the Warriors are going to regain their contender status. This is a guy who everyone gave up on after KD left. Everyone gave up on this team after Kevin Durant left. So, with him being back in the fold and showing why he is probably the best shooter of all time, he's my MVP because without him, Golden State goes nowhere and they are nowhere near a playoff caliber team. Rookie of the year. I got to go with you here, Luke. LaMelo Ball. I mean, between seeing his highlights on every social media account across Instagram and Twitter for this entire season, if we really look at his play, he really did help to elevate the Charlotte Hornets. And as good as Anthony Edwards was, and as good as Tyrese Halliburton was, they were not on playoff teams. Their play, while having great stats, didn't exactly help to essentially make their teams better. And I think they'll be great players in the future. But LaMelo Ball is the rookie of the year in my eyes. Defensive player of the year, I think you could give it to any of them, but I think it's Ben Simmons. I think what you said is completely correct. The versatility, the ability to cover just about anybody, it's underrated and really it's very impressive, especially in the modern NBA. Most improved player, do I even really need to say it? It's Julius Randle. Dude's going to be in consideration for not just most improved player, but all NBA. He was an all-star. This dude is on another level right now, and I think he continues to grow as a player over the next few years. Defense NBA six man. I think that there's not really a definition of the word, but I think it's Derrick Rose, in my opinion. That's not just because I'm a Knicks fan, but seeing what he does coming off the bench to keep the Knicks in games and not only keep them in games, but win them games this season. I think that Derrick Rose, without him, the Knicks would be in a completely different spot, probably fighting for a play in spot and not winning some of these games where he came up clutch with 15 points and 5 assists and a few boards. And coach of the year, listen, you can make a great case for Monty Williams turning around the Phoenix Suns from where they've been the past few years, but I don't see how it isn't Tom Thibodeau. The Knicks were literally one of the worst teams in basketball again last year, and the year before that, they had the worst record in the league. To be the 4 seed this year, at the beginning of the year, people would have thought it would have been nothing short of a miracle. But it happened, and the Knicks are back. Nobody was thinking that for the next few years. The Knicks were a laughing stock, a complete and utter joke before this new regime got here. And Tom Thibodeau deserves a huge, huge part of the credit for flipping around the fortunes of this Knicks franchise.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think just one more thing on the Knicks that I think is pretty notable is they've always had these like high aspirations, like New York fans and like on Twitter, you see like, oh, we're gonna get the best free agents every year. We're New York, blah 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 blah. I think this is the year where it's actually a legitimate thing to say because I think when free agents, specifically high level players, they want to be like a main guy on a team. You want to do it on a team that fights, that's competitive, even without you. So now you can come and be like that final, in your head, that final piece for that team. And I think that's something we saw years ago with OKC when Westbrook went crazy and then the Paul George sweepstakes for the offseason. They got Paul George because that was a team that was competitive. Paul George thought he was that last guy that could bring them over the edge. That didn't happen. Another team, the Clippers. They were that 8 seed that fought those not the 73 win Warriors, but the KD Warriors. They fought them hard. They won 2 games in that series. They battled with them. They had a great year with just pretty much role players. What do they get? They get Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Like, and now I think the Knicks are a team that you see. Julius Randle has been a star. You have to give him credit, but they're a team that no one expected to win, but they fight hard. They're playing extremely well, very worthy of that 4 seed. Now, free agents in this offseason, they might be like, hey, like New York obviously is an incredible place to play already. Now they have that team that fights, they have that culture, they have Julius Randle. That's the team I want to go play for, and I want to go win in that building in Madison Square Garden. So I think it's a legitimate thing. The Knicks now they can finally like realistically have those aspirations for free agent level talent.
I have a hot take, and I mean, if we're sticking the free agency, I would love to see him sign Lonzo Ball. I feel like that'd be a great addition as a free agent. I think that if they were able to land this guy in a trade, he would fit the culture perfectly. And that guy's Damian Lillard. I think Damian Lillard would be the perfect addition to this team.
Be kind of
They
sick.
need another guard. He has that gritty, hard nosed attitude that I think people in New York would absolutely adore. And I think he'd fit in with Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, all those guys absolutely perfectly. And that would make the Knicks a huge contender and make them very dangerous in a lot of different ways. But stay locked and loaded because the NBA playoffs are just beginning, and we'll have more scorching hot takes to bless your ears with in the next upcoming weeks. So with that, transitioning to another great sport, the MLB, Major League Baseball. Man, this has been an interesting year if you're a Mets and Phillies fan. I'll just say that. And
Mets are just cheating for their wins, getting calls on hit by pitches that are winning them games.
that was weeks ago, dude. The Mets are currently in first place. The Phillies are currently in second place. I'm gonna be honest, right? I didn't think the Phillies would be this good to start the year. And quite frankly, they haven't exactly been quote unquote good.
Yeah, I was gonna say I wouldn't call them good.
Here's the thing though, right? The NL East is currently in shambles right now. And the Mets and Phillies are the two best teams in the division that are in complete shambles. The Mets currently have half their roster on the injured list, are playing guys like Jonasway Vargas and pitching guys you probably have never heard of. So to give you kind of an idea of what's going on here with the Mets, their starting lineup 2 days ago against the Atlanta Braves was Jonathan Villar, usually a bench guy, Francisco Lindor, who's gotten off to a slow start this year, Cameron Maybin, who, this isn't a joke, they got from the Cubs for $1. Dom Smith, James McCann, Jose Peraza, Jonasway Vargas, and Cahill Lee. Cahill Lee currently has 8 at-bats and has struck out 8 times.
Consistency.
And listen, Jacob deGrom comes back on Tuesday of next week. The Mets are still in first place by 1.5 games. Their guys will slowly start to come back, but it's been a crazy year. And like I said, the new ownership, the new regime, if these type of injuries happened last year, the Mets would literally go on a 10-game losing streak because they would not have the guys to compete. They have depth. They have major league talent now. So when guys do get hurt and guys do underperform, they're able to keep the ship afloat. However, barely, but they're able to stay competitive and still be one of the top teams in the NL. And I think they will be one of the top teams in the NL by the end of the year because of the depth and talent that they have all across the roster. So with the Phillies, what do you got so far?
Dude, they're bad. I mean, all my all my notes are negative things, so it's kind of funny that they're 500 and they're second in the division. I'll start with the positive. I think the trio of Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, and Zach Eflin have been awesome. I think that's something that any team that's going to be competitive needs. You need guys that are going to carry you, and I think for the most part, that's what they've done. That's the only reason they're even average in the first place. Nola, Wheeler, and Eflin have combined for a 3.29 ERA, which is pretty solid between three guys in the top of your rotation. But the problem is the Phillies are only 14 and 13 in those games. Like their hitting has been so inconsistent, and they've had injuries too. But I think even when they're healthy, they've struggled hitting, as most teams have this year. But they've been very inconsistent. Harper's been injured after he got hit in the face. Now his shoulder is tough. He's coming back from injury. JT Realmuto's missed games here and there. Didi Gregorius is now going on the injured list. It's been tough. The Phillies center field has been a question the entire year with Roman Quinn, Adam Hazley, now Odubel Herrera. So it's just all over the place. Nick Maton has been a plus. He's had to step in because of all those injuries. He's been a role guy that has played all over the field, and he's been a lot of fun to watch. I really like him. But now to the negatives, the injuries. The 4 and 5 spot in the Phillies rotation has been terrible. Chase Anderson has been very bad. Matt Moore, oh, he came from Japan. What a return story. No, he was in Japan for a reason, Brandon. He was very bad at pitching baseballs in the United States. So he got roughed up. Now Vince Velasquez tries to hop back into that rotation. He's injured. So he didn't even get to make his start the other day. David Hale had to start. David Hale's been a part of a terrible bullpen. The Phillies lead the NL in strikeouts with 449. They've had double-digit strikeouts in 27 of their 44 games. And they're in second place in the NL. So it's tough. And there's been positives. I know I just ran off a ton of negative things. The Phillies have had their positives. Andrew McCutchen's on fire. He's got 6 home runs in his last 17 games this month. He's been very good, but lately. But it's just been inconsistent. And it's funny to see them in second place, and the fact that a team like the Braves is in fourth right now, albeit it's a very close division race. The fact that the Braves are in fourth 40-something games into the year is interesting. And that I don't think the Phillies by the end of it will be up near the top. My prediction has been Phillies finish in third. I think the Mets and Braves finish ahead of them, but we'll have to see. It's funny that they're right here, and the Mets, they've played a lot less games, right? Because they had a lot of games canceled earlier in the year. Yeah. So it'll be interesting, but I'm excited for more division games. I think that's obviously where the division's won and lost. So we'll see, Brandon. It'll be a ride. Still 120 games left, so we've got plenty to go.
Oh yeah, this season is by no means over in the slightest. So moving on to more of a broader picture before we jump to our favorite part of the show. I just wanted to say the Red Sox have surprised me insanely. Just that offense is off the charts. The Astros being good, that's a bit of a surprise. The Cincinnati Reds bottoming out basically, 19 and 23 to start the year. Pretty surprising. And the San Francisco Giants having 28 wins already. Didn't expect that one, especially with their
Gabe
talent.
Kapler, man.
Yeah, I thought they were another year or two away. And man, what happened to Minnesota? Minnesota Twins are brutal this year. They are 15 and 28. They are the worst team in baseball currently. So that means they are worse than
At least they have the Timberwolves.
they're worse than the Pirates, and they are worse than the Rockies. So a lot heads could be rolling in the Twin Cities, man. What have you seen so far? That's stood
I
out to
have
you.
2 baseball points that I want to make. Did you see Jacob deGrom practically killing single A bat? It's single A, right? That he was in his rehab start. 8 strikeouts against the 9 batters he faced, right? or something along those lines. That's terrifying. Imagine you're a young guy. You're like, all right, now I'm gonna start to make my run. I'm a few years away from the majors, but like it starts here. You look, it's your first start of your career. Yeah. You go out and see your pitcher, you're batting against Jacob DeGrom. Like, what in the world? That's tough. And then my other point is Tony La Russa is old and I don't like it. How do you criticize your own guy for hitting a home run? And how do you are you okay with him getting thrown at? Like, come on, man. That frustrated me. I don't know what you think about that.
The unwritten rules of baseball are a joke. I think that we need to scrap any sort of remembrance of that. It's just a joke at this point. How are you okay with your guy getting hit? I'll never know. I mean, LaRussa is a guy that had two DUIs, so him casting judgment on anybody is absolutely hilarious, and he should not be taken
Go for
seriously.
the throat, Brandon.
He shouldn't be taken seriously by anyone. And in terms of DeGrom, a funny stat I came across, 6 of the players that he faced last night in that lineup were born after the year 2000. So they're not just
Children.
they're not just
He's
young.
abusing children.
They're not just young. They are our age, and that makes me feel very old because kids are playing professional baseball that are soon to be younger than me, and I don't know how to feel about that. But like with all sports, stay locked and loaded to the show because, like Luke said, there's 120 games left in the baseball season. And if something crazy happens with the Mets, you'll get to hear one of my legendary rants. But otherwise, I'm in great spirits. And because I'm in great spirits, it's time for the Book It picks of the day, the week, the something. I don't know. It's all over the place. It's much easier during NFL season. I'll say that, but I like to keep the topic alive, so we will do that for now. So I'm gonna get started. The Nationals. I'm taking the spread. They are the favorite today. They are 1.5 run favorites versus the Baltimore Orioles. Steven Strasburg is on the mound making his first start since being put on the 10-day injured list. He is facing the Orioles. The Orioles are not that great of a team. The only thing that could come back to bite me with this one is the fact that the Nationals are not good anymore. Their lineup is quite honestly terrible outside of Juan Soto. So that could end up biting me in the behind, but you can book it that Washington will win this game by more than 1.5 runs. Hopefully. Next one, Golden State Warriors, Memphis Grizzlies, under 221 points. That is not saying that Steph Curry is not going to go off or the Warriors aren't going to score a lot of points. I just think that their defense is going to hold Memphis to a small amount of points and that Memphis is not a high octane offense. They pride themselves on the defensive end of things. If this turns into a shootout, I'll be very, very, very surprised. But you can book it that this game is heading the under. Next game, San Diego Padres versus the Seattle Mariners. Considering the Mariners have been no hit twice this year already, that's something we did not get to with baseball, and we will touch on that on another show when there is another no hitter. But the Mariners are one of 3 teams to be no hit twice this year already. They are a terrible hitting team. Chris Paddock is a pretty good pitcher. Chris Paddock is a part of a team that can score runs. Even if he doesn't have his best game, I think the Padres will win this game by 2 or 3 runs. So this is my lock of the week. This is a bucket, but this is my lock. And then transitioning to tomorrow, I'm taking the Bucks and Heat hitting the over of 226. These are 2 teams that score a lot. Their defense is good, not great, but I think in the playoffs, offense can trump everything. And I like this pick a lot. So you can book it. Bucks Heat joining the Overs Club on Saturday night.
Beautiful. Love your versatility because I went with one sport. I went with 4 picks in the first round of the NBA playoffs. So getting it started, I had to respect the upsets I predicted. So Lakers at plus 2.5 against the Suns. I thought that one was a gimme for me at least. I think the Lakers experience, the Suns inexperience. The Lakers coming off a win. They've already pretty much got a playoff experience game this year. The Suns, we know how good Chris Paul is and how much experience he has, but Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, I still have to see what they can do in the playoffs because Devin Booker, we've seen him put up 25, 30 points on teams that sucked. We've seen him have a pretty solid scoring season right now, but this is when it matters. And can Devin Booker against playoff level defense put up 25 to 30 points? That's what I'm yet to see. And I think the Lakers, having that experience, are going to go into Phoenix and win game 1. So you can book it at Lakers plus 2.5. And now for the Blazers and Nuggets game, I'm respecting another upset. I had the Blazers plus 1. I think although it'll be in Denver and they have that altitude, I still think the Blazers, for the reasons I said earlier, with no Jamal Murray, Lillard and McCollum are going to get theirs, and now they don't have to defend an all-star level point guard on the other side. I think that's huge. We saw the Nuggets make their run to the conference finals last season because of Jokic and Jamal Murray. Now Jokic alone, no Will Barton either. I think that's going to be huge. So I'm going to take the Blazers plus 1 to win game 1 on the road. You can book it. Next one, it's another we got a lot of close ones here. Knicks and Hawks. I'm taking the Knicks at -1. I think the Knicks style is built for the playoffs, that gritty defense. Both teams are kind of inexperienced when it comes to the postseason, so I don't think anyone really has an advantage there. But for Tom Thibodeau, he's got the playoff experience as of more recently than Nate McMillan. Nate McMillan is an interim coach. He got swept out of the playoffs last year. I like what Tom Thibodeau has done for the culture. I really am excited to see what happens with Trae Young and this Knicks defense. Because is Trae Young going to get bumped around a little bit? Is he going to get roughed up? We know he likes to draw those fouls. Well, maybe the Knicks will make the most of those foul calls, But I think the Knicks are just playing better than the Hawks right now, and I think the Knicks have the style for the playoffs. So I'm going Knicks -1 in front of a sold-out Madison Square Garden crowd. I think that'll be huge for them. And finally, my last one is actually a series and the amount of games in the series. At plus 250 in the Nets Celtics series, I'm going under 4.5 games, which basically means I'm predicting a Nets sweep. The Celtics are just so bad, man, and they're so banged up. No Jaylen Brown. Robert Williams got knocked out of the play-in game. No, we don't know if he'll be back. Marcus Smart banged up earlier in the season. He got hit pretty hard in the play-in game. He came back, but he's not at 100%. It's going to take Jason Tatum scoring 60 points to win a game in this series because now the Nets are finally healthy, and you could always point to chemistry issues and stuff like that. But the Celtics, I just don't think they're a very good team. They just don't have the guys to defend these 3 players, and Tatum's the only one with the offensive capability to do anything replicating what one of those guys can do on the Nets. So I think it's going to be a sweep. That's why I'm going under 4.5 games at plus 250. I like the odds. I think that's pretty cool for a series that I think is going to be a sweep. So you can book it.
Luke is cooking with gas. I love those picks.
I just want Boston to fail, and I think they will.
So on that note, we are at the end of our first episode back. Basically at the end of another episode of the Big Apple and Broad Street Sports Podcast, but I want to make it sound better. Make sure to listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, just Google Podcasts, wherever you can find it. If there is a podcast app, there is a good shot you can find our show. Also, stay tuned to our social media accounts. That includes TikTok, that includes Instagram, that includes Twitter, that includes YouTube. Just stay tuned, because as more sports news and sports events come up, we're going to be posting stuff on there from past shows, maybe some live reactions. Who knows what we'll come up with, but we'll be sure to make it worth your while. So on that note, for my co-host Luke Milai and myself, Brandon Pockers, thank you for joining us on another great episode, and
We'll catch you next time.